A Tale of Two Cities, A Century of Social Action. A History of Salford and Manchester since Peterloo. On the 16th of August 1819, a crowd of 60 to 80,000 men, women and children gathered at St. Peter's Field, Manchester, to demand the reform of parliamentary representation. The massacre was a defining moment of its age and led to the foundation of the Manchester Guardian. In 1833, as a reaction to the appalling living conditions within the city of Manchester, several public-spirited men came together, leading to the development of the Manchester and Salford District Provident Society. The aim was to provide advice, information and financial relief to people in need. Over the years, the organisation grew, and by 1936, the first Gaddum House was opened to provide a centre for voluntary societies and a meeting place for social workers. Also, the organisation's name evolved over time and has been known as the District Provident and Family Welfare Society, the Family Welfare Association of Manchester and Salford, FWA, and in 1999 it became the Gaddum Centre. In 2019, they became Gaddum. The Booth Charities were established in the first quarter of the 17th century when Humphrey Booth the Elder, a rich fustian merchant of Manchester and Salford, granted lands worth £20 a year to trustees for the relief of the poor, old or disabled people in Salford. The Booth Charities Act of 1846 updated the administration of the charities, improving their management. This act united the trustees of the charities of Humphrey Booth the Elder and the Younger, and led to more direct involvement by the town council. Over 200 years ago, the Beefsteak Chapel in Salford was the first vegetarian church, led by the Reverend William Cowherd. At this time, the poor would eat the cheapest meat. This meant a diet featuring a great deal of offal. Cowherd believed that God inhabited every animal, and as such it was a sin to eat meat. His followers, aptly named Cowherdites, went on to form the Vegetarian Society. In 1869, Deansgate was one of the most squalid slum areas in the city, along with Salford and Hume. Alfred Alsop decided to create a charitable movement, Manchester and Salford Street Children's Mission, that resolved to provide the basic necessities of life: food, shelter and clothing. Following a first mission site in Lombard Street, the site on Wood Street was acquired in 1873 and a brand new building built. Accommodation was provided there for homeless boys and later girls, and free dinners, clothing and shoes were provided for hundreds of children and their families. The Together Trust was founded in 1870 by Leonard Kilby Shaw and Richard Bramwell Taylor, two Sunday school teachers who volunteered at St. Anne's Ragged School, Manchester. They were inspired to take action to help the many children and young people whom they saw living rough on the city's streets. Salford Lads Club was founded in 1903 by two brothers, James and William Groves, from the family of brewers who owned Groves and Whitnall Brewery, and the family is still involved to this day. The club was opened on the 30th of January 1904 by Robert Baden-Powell, the founder of the Scout movement. The club is entirely run by volunteers, and they deliver sport and recreational activities to the lads and girls of Ordsall. In 1919, Thomas Hancock Nunn, along with other supporters, established the National Council of Social Service to promote the coordination of services, provide information, and promote the formation of local councils of social service. Many well-known organisations started out as projects within NCSS, which continues today as the National Council for Voluntary Organisations. In 1919, Henry Gaddum and others concerned about a lack of coordination between voluntary and statutory organisations formed the Manchester and Salford Council of Social Service. The aims of MSCSS were to promote cooperation between voluntary organisations, to assist in the training of social workers, to foster developments likely to improve the welfare of the community, and to administer funds for general well-being. The MSCSS operated until 1973, when it split to form individual Salford and Manchester organisations in line with the new 1974 local government boundaries. As a consequence of the world economic crisis in 1929, there was mass unemployment. Proposed further cuts to unemployment benefit resulted in over 10,000 members of the Salford branch of the National Unemployed Workers Movement marching on the Town Hall in Bexley Square, demanding no cuts to the unemployment benefit, no cuts to teachers' salaries, free coal for the unemployed in winter, and free milk for children under 5. As the march reached Chapel Street, it was cordoned off, and when organisers asked for a deputation to be allowed through to put their demands to Salford Council, the protesters were attacked by mounted police. In spite of the efforts of the NUWM, Salford City Council cut relief by £70,000. Salford became a distressed area and cuts at the expense of the unemployed continued. Community in Eccles was established in the 1950s, and it began with the arrival of 3 men in search of work and expanded from there. In 1990, following the reunification of North and South Yemen, the Yemeni Community Association was established. It continues to support its members while forging positive links with the wider population in Salford. MSCSS celebrated its golden anniversary with choirs and a brass band. It had presided over fundamental changes to social worker training and the voluntary and community sector. Its time was about to come to an end as further changes led to the formation of separate Manchester and Salford infrastructure organisations. In 1973, it was agreed to separate the work of Manchester and Salford Council of Social Service into 2 Manchester and Salford organisations in line with new local authority boundaries. The Salford District Community Council Executive Committee began to meet from May 1973 and soon became known as Salford Council for Voluntary Service. In 1974, MSCSS was legally dissolved, but in practice it continued as the newly formed Manchester CVS. By 1974, there were CVSs in Salford, Manchester and Greater Manchester. Eventually, CVSs were established in all the remaining metropolitan boroughs of Greater Manchester. In the 1980s, Salford CVS obtained funding for a second volunteer bureau organiser. The bureau, which acted as a broker between voluntary organisations and potential volunteers, had been a feature of CVS from the beginning. In 1982, the last of the Salford docks closed, putting many people out of work. There was a dramatic increase in the number of volunteers coming forward, many of them unskilled men between the ages of 16 and 34. Manchester CVS set up MAC, Manchester Alliance for Community Care, with a group of local organisations, including the Gaddum Centre and Age Concern, to campaign for the closure of institutional forms of care and a move to a community-based approach. MAC was one of the first organisations of its kind in the country. The Hawaiian Society was started by a group of community-minded and dedicated Chinese women who felt that the views and needs of these women were not being represented and that women were discriminated against both by British society and their own community and families. Having identified these inequalities and needs, the Hawaiian Society was constituted in December 1988. Initially, the Society was mainly concerned with helping Chinese women who had suffered domestic violence and the breakdown of family life by offering practical, social and emotional support. Gradually and naturally, Hawaiian services have reached out and delivered to not only the Chinese community, but to other Black and minority ethnic communities. Salford CVS coordinated the meetings of the Salford voluntary sector in the 90s, a network of groups who received funding from the City Council's voluntary sector budget, and produced an information booklet with details about each group. Karen Minute recalls, "When cuts were coming in, it seemed like a good idea to get all the council-funded organisations to work together rather than competing for funds." Macc became an independent organisation and moved into its own premises at Swan Building, Swan Street, Manchester, where it remains to this day. When Bolton businessman Derek Gaskell brought his wife Dorothy home after life-saving brain surgery at Hope Hospital, she was unable to do anything for herself. Because of this unexpected and traumatic experience, Derek was inspired to establish a registered charity, Neurological Research, in 1986. The appointment of the charity's first employee saw its relaunch as Basic, Brain and Spinal Injury Charity in 1994. START began life as a program of arts courses run for those with mental health issues by their founder, Bernadette Conlon. In the early days, Bernadette delivered courses essentially from the boot of her car, until moving to a studio in 2000 when START became a registered charity. The team soon grew and in 2004 moved to its current home at Brunswick House. Broughton Trust Charity was set up in December 1999 in Salford. Through trusted partnerships, they help support the creation of strong, resilient and sustainable communities by raising aspirations, increasing general well-being via learning, training and employment-supported opportunities. In 2001, Salford CVS had to move away from their premises at 12 Irwell Place to make way for the redevelopment of the centre of Eccles. They moved to the ground floor of the old town hall, just across the road, and soon afterwards to refurbished offices on the first floor. Heart of Salford Awards are Salford CVS and Volunteer Centre Salford's prestigious annual ceremony to celebrate volunteering and voluntary community and social enterprise organisations in Salford. This event acknowledges the vast contribution made by volunteers and VCSE sector organisations in Salford. The Federation of Jewish Services was created in December 2009. It was brought about by the merger of two of Manchester Jewry's oldest charities, the Fed and Heathlands Village. In November 2011, they became known as the Fed, whilst retaining their full title of the Federation of Jewish Services for legal purposes. Manchester Community Central launched as a new capacity building support service for the city's VCSE sector organisations. It was designed as a branded service which can be managed and delivered by a partnership which can change and evolve over time, but without disruption to provision for local groups. Volunteer Centre Manchester was launched as a key part of Macc's new role as the main infrastructure agency for the city. Volunteer Centre Manchester provides information, support and training to Manchester residents who want to volunteer and to organisations who work with or involve volunteers. On the 22nd of July 2019, Salford CVS, Macc and Gaddum held a joint event to mark 100 years since MSCSS was formed. One of the main aims of the MSCSS was to coordinate organisations delivering services. We are still here to make sure everyone in the two cities has equal access to services and support.